Greetings agents, this is Private Boulders, the mediocre gamer, and this is the Division 2. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my content. I do hope that you find it helpful or useful. If you do, please consider clicking the like and or subscribing. Today I wanted to target this video at new players or newer players to Division 2. And specifically a DPS build that is not strikers. Mainly because this build is generally fairly easy to put together. There's lots of bits and pieces that you can swap in and out of the build to customize your style or situation. So it's basically an all high-end build, and there's no exotics, so you don't need to have any particular exotics like the Coyote's Mask or something like that to make this build work. Obviously, it's not going to do as much damage as a striker build at full stacks, but it is a good build to learn placement and learn situational awareness and things like that. So just going to break the build down and go through each piece bit by bit. So we'll start with the specialization choice, which I've chosen Gunner. So there's two things that I like about the Gunner spec. The first one is that you get 10% armor for each kill, for each enemy kill. So that can be quite helpful, particularly if you're running a build like a DPS build that's full red, as you'll get hit quite a lot. You don't have much armor to start with. Generally, you'll be having around 800,000 in armor, so having that armor on kill really helps. The other thing I like is that every 60 seconds you generate 10% of total ammo. So if you're like me and you don't have a great your accuracy is not great, having that kind of armor coming in, it does come in handy, particularly if you're in an extended firefight. So that's handy. There's also a couple of other things that come in handy. Your rate of fire is increased by 5% on each enemy kill for 5 seconds. And if you're not moving, you get 10% weapon handling. But you need to be motionless for 1 second. Also, just check to make sure that the your passive talent, for your weapon damage, it does match up with whatever weapons you're using. So if you're using, like a LMG or an assault rifle or a shotgun, just make sure that you've got your damage maxed out on those options there, so you're getting that 5% increased damage. If you're, just check to make sure you haven't got it maxed out on a marksman's rifle or a submachine gun or something like that, if that's not what you're using. So just make sure that those are matching up with whatever your primary and secondary weapons are. So that's about it for the spec weapon. You can go with something different if you want, whatever you're comfortable with, but I find that the Gunner spec works well with a DPS build. Alright, so if we go on to the build itself now, the primary weapon I have chosen is a FAMAS. Mainly because it's a tried and tested weapon that has worked great in the past and still works well today. It has a 900 rounds per minute rate of fire, and I have chosen on this particular instance to use Killer as the talent. So killing an enemy with a critical hit grants 70% critical hit damage for 10 seconds. So you want to just make sure that your critical hit chance is as close to 60% as possible, so that you're really maximizing the effect of that talent. And probably the attribute that you want to go for here is damage to targets out of cover. Make sure that that's as close to 10% as possible, as most of the targets that you are firing at or engaging in combat with are going to be out of cover, so that 10% extra damage really comes in handy. Obviously, you don't need to use FAMAS. If you have an exotic weapon like the St. Elmo's or a Chameleon or something like that, then that is going to work well. Another thing you could use would be the named F2000, which is the shield splinterer. That is also a very capable weapon. But for the purposes of this, I just thought I'd go with FAMAS, as it has been very popular in the past and it still is popular today. It has been kind of overshadowed by the Lexington, which is a newer weapon that has just come out, but a lot of newer players may not have the Lexington, so I've just gone with FAMAS in this video. Secondary weapon doesn't really matter a great deal. I've gone with a shotgun called the Lefty, but I don't think I have used it much. So that's really a personal preference. All right, so if we go to the mask, I've gone with a Grupo mask. So one piece of Grupo gives 13% critical hit damage. So we're just trying to get that critical hit damage as high as possible so that we can take advantage of that killer talent on the FAMAS. If you do have Coyote's mask, then go for it. But for the purposes of this video, I've gone with no exotics, but Coyote's mask slots in really well there. So the Grupo piece gives us, obviously it's a weapon damage, and then if you can find one or recalibrate one so that has critical hit chance and critical hit damage, that would be great. And then depending on how you're going with your stats, you want to slot in either a critical hit chance or a critical hit damage mod to try and max out or get your critical hit chance to 60 and then spec everything else into critical hit damage if you want to. Then if we go to the backpack, this is the first of 3 Providence defense pieces that I have. This is the named backpack called the Gift, which comes with perfect vigilance. So perfect vigilance increases total weapon damage by 25%. If you take damage, it disables the buff for 3 seconds. So that's an instant 25% damage amp with that one. Obviously its core attribute is weapon damage, and then once again, if you can spec this into critical hit damage, critical hit chance, and then use a mod to either increase your critical hit chance or critical hit damage depending on where you're going. So that's the first of 3 pieces. 3 pieces of Providence will give you, first of all, 13% headshot damage, 8% critical hit chance, and then 13% critical hit damage. So the second piece I have is the chest piece, which is the Sacrifice, which comes with perfect glass cannon. So all damage you deal is amplified by 30%. Obviously the downside of that is all damage you take is amplified by 60%. A lot of people don't like using glass cannon, but you will find that if you are clever and careful about your placement and how you are using it, then you'll find that it can be quite helpful and quite formidable when you're in combat. So it does, having this build does kind of teach you how to keep your head down. It teaches you where to be, where your placement needs to be, and basically, I think it gives you a good foundation for moving into legendary content later on and raids and so forth. So it does make you think a bit more tactically, and it does increase your situational awareness. So that's why I've included the sacrifice. So once again, the attributes you want are critical hit chance and critical hit damage, and then use a critical hit, either damage or critical hit chance mod to try and get those attributes as high as possible. And then we move on to the holster, which is the third piece of the Providence. Once again, this is the same. It's a weapon damage piece. And then once again, I've gone with weapon handling on this one. But depending on how you play or how your stats are going, you may want to just make this a straight out critical hit chance, critical hit damage on those second attributes. So that rounds that out. With the gloves, I have gone with a Zia or Zwia brand set. This is a named glove called Eagle's Grasp. So one piece of Zwia gives us 15% magazine size. So I find that a little bit handy with the FAMAS, as I put an increased magazine. I put the magazine that has 15 extra rounds on the FAMAS, and then coupled with this one piece of Zwia, my magazine size is 51 rounds. So it just gives you a little bit more uptime between reloads. You don't have to do it that way, but for me personally, I just find that makes it a little bit helpful. If you have contractor's gloves, then contractor's gloves slot in here quite nicely. And probably I don't know if new players would have contractor's gloves, but obviously they go in there quite nicely as well. That 8% damage to armor comes in handy. And then one piece of the Petrov defense group, which is what the contractor's gloves belong to as far as brand sets go, gives 10% LMG damage. So if you're using an LMG as opposed to an assault rifle, then those contractor's gloves work well. I've just gone with Eagle's Grasp for that extra magazine size, because the FAMAS has 900 rounds per minute, so it tends to go through ammo fairly quickly. So just having that little bit of extra rounds in the mag can just help with that with that uptime, I guess. The Eagle's Grasp comes with weapon handling as a minor attribute. You can keep that if you want, or swap it out for either critical hit chance or critical hit damage. So just depending on how you want to play it, either keep the weapon handling and then go with critical hit chance or critical hit damage. And then the last piece is the Fox's Prayers knee pads, which is part of the Overlord Armaments brand set. So this is probably a really great piece to have because it does come with 8% damage to targets out of cover. So if you don't have Fox's Prayers yet, I would recommend that you farm for this, either in Countdown or something like that. Because if you have 10% damage to targets out of cover on your primary weapon, and then you've got 8% damage to targets out of cover on your Fox's Prayers, then that's basically another 18% damage to targets out of cover you're getting when you're in combat, which comes in handy. It's a little bit of extra damage boost that you're getting because most of the enemies that you're fighting are going to be out of cover, so that really helps there. And once again, it's a full red piece. So we've got, if you've maxed this out, you've got 15% weapon damage, and then the third attribute just depends on your stats. Either go with, obviously critical hit chance or critical hit damage there. And that kind of rounds out those 6 gear set pieces. There's a little bit of variability there on how you want to play it. But once again, it's quite a capable gear set. For the skills, I would probably recommend having a Reviver Hive. If you go down, then that Reviver Hive is going to bring you back up. The second one, I tend to use the Decoy, particularly when using Glass Cannon, as the Decoy will obviously draw the enemy's attention away from you, allowing you to kind of target them and bring them down as quick as possible. The other one you could possibly consider, or the other ones you could consider, would be maybe a turret, the assault turret, throwing that out. It's not going to do much damage, but once again, it kind of acts as a bit of a decoy. Just to try and draw some attention away from you. They have kind of similar durations and similar cooldowns. So it's whatever you feel more comfortable with. Or if you wanted to, you could go with a shield, like a Crusader shield or something like that, just for a bit of damage mitigation. So yeah, that's about it. Final thoughts, I guess. Let's just have a look at the stats of this build. So weapon damage is at 97,600,000. Critical hit chance is at 57.5%, and critical hit damage is at 160%. Headshot damage is at 88%. So if you're good at getting headshots or close to the headshots or something like that, then that will also be a benefit. I'm not great at that, so I tend to go for body shots. But it kind of does depend on your playstyle. So yeah, there you go. I guess most people are using strikers. If you're a newer player and you might not have farmed your strikers gear yet, then this is an alternative. It's probably not going to be doing as much damage as a striker set at full stacks, but it's an alternative to strikers, and I think you'll pick up a few skills from using this about keeping your head down, choosing your shots, and being placed in locations that allow you to take advantage of these brand sets or this high-end build. So anyway, I think I've spoken enough. That's it for now. What are your thoughts? Are you a newer player? What do you think of this build? Are you using strikers, or is this something that you would consider? Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe out there, agents, and take care.